Welcome to Talk It Up, a Christian parenting podcast where our goal is to discuss 21st century topics to help you raise your kids. Hey, welcome back to Talk It Up. This is our 10th episode, and we are super excited that you've joined us today. We have an incredible guest. He's been here before, and I'll get to him in 2 seconds. But the topic of our conversation today is focused around a sermon series that we're doing here at Mount Bethel Church. It's titled God's Design, the Family Code. And a long time ago, it was actually last year in the fall, we got together as a pastor's group and narrowed in on what we wanted to teach and what we wanted our families to know about being spiritual leaders in the household. And we know that it's such an important topic that we dropped it in as a sermon series, and we're actually going to piggyback off of some of those things and those conversations as a church, and we're going to talk about them here today. And I've got our lead pastor, our senior pastor, Dr. Jody Ray. What's up, brother? You doing all right?
I'm doing great.
All right, man. Well, it's good to have you again.
Yep.
He was on episode 2, if you remember. If you have not seen that episode, I was with my wife, Wendy. Jody had his wife, Shelly, on. We had a great conversation. We talked forever.
Yeah, it was a long one.
It was a good time, but we had great stories. Yep. But when you get Wendy and Shelly together, they can talk for a long time, right? We love them to death, though. It's great. But Jody's been leading this sermon series, God's Design, for us. And I just wanted to sit down, have a quick chat, pull maybe a couple things out that you didn't have an opportunity to add in a sermon, or maybe just, talk about some different things that we can apply to parents in our ministry and beyond. If you don't have a book, God's Design, the Family Code, we have them here at Mount Bethel Church if you're able to get to our campus, but we also have the ability for you to download those from wherever you are. We'll put a link in the description of this video. But again, Jody, thanks for being here. Let's jump in, man, and we're going to have a good time.
Yep.
All right?
Let's go.
Cool. Let's get going. Why is it important for parents to be spiritual leaders in their home? Let's go right to it.
Well, because your family is being led somewhere.
Amen.
It's going somewhere. And you are leading them somewhere. And so understanding that, one, you're leading them somewhere, and then you got to determine, where you're leading your family to go. And so being very focused on that piece for me, because we had the definition that we use for spiritual leadership is leading others to a deeper, more intimate relationship with Jesus. And so, as in the world in which we live in today, there's not a greater a job as husbands and wives, moms and dads, that we can do for our families than to lead them spiritually.
Okay. Yeah. So let's double down on the spiritual part, because we could certainly have people that tune into this that they might be teetering a little bit on Christianity. They might not be full believers. They might just not believe at all. Why the spiritual aspect of it? Why does Jesus play a part in it? Because a parent could say, well, I'm leading my kid to do the right thing. I'm leading him to teach people, lead people the right way, or be a nice friend. I'm leading my family. But what is missing if they don't attach Jesus to it?
So if you don't, everybody lives by a certain truth, whether you recognize it or not, believe it or not, there is a truth that you live by. And so you're either the arbiter of your own truth, or you get that truth from somewhere else. And for me and our family, that truth is found in the person of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so and there's just so much that comes at our families in this day and age. And there's, so many different, ideologies and belief systems out there. And it's not only very confusing and distracting, but they can also get you into a lot of trouble. And so for us and for me, leading my family in a relationship with Jesus, who we believe is the truth, is the most important thing that we do, because the reality is everything is spiritual, and everything there's how we relate to each other as family, family dynamics. There's all kinds of spirituality in that, right? And so guiding the family towards that truth, because once you set what truth is and what the lens by which you're going to view the world, then when questions or problems or things come up, you have a way of navigating that that's not just rolling a dice at it or, doing a multiple choice test of choosing. And so that's why it's so important for us. And because there's a lot of things in our culture that says are good and okay.
Yep.
And there's some things that are even the culture today thinks that are morally okay, but have tremendous spiritual consequence if we're not careful.
Sure, yeah.
And so that's why leading our family to a deeper, more intimate relationship with Jesus is so important.
Yeah. Scripture's clear. I am the way, the truth. There's not I am a way or a truth. And I would go as far as saying that there's so many different ways that kids can go right now, that if you're not teaching them the way, then they can get lost a little bit in what culture is going to teach them, because there's going to be, as you said, many other ways that they can attach themselves to, many other truths that might turn into an untruth in the future. Yeah. But Jesus is a non-changing, absolute truth. And that's where the spiritual leadership comes in, is getting to the point that we can teach our kids and they know without fail, this is exactly the person that you need to put your faith in and your trust in and your life in, because he ain't going to change on you.
No.
Regardless of what society tells us, that's it.
Yep.
Love it. You said in a sermon recently, you said this, that spiritual leadership starts with surrender. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if Jesus is going to lead me and my household, our house spiritually, it requires a surrendering to his lordship, right? And so, for example, I always use the example of forgiveness, because everybody at some point in their lives has had to deal with forgiveness. Jesus doesn't say, hey, when you feel like it, forgive somebody. Or when the timing's right, you forgive them. Or the command for us is to forgive. And so I have to surrender to that, and I have to act even when I don't feel when I surrender. And so our feelings, they deceive us. They lie to us at times. And so when we operate based off feelings, for example, that'll get you in a lot of trouble. I mean, the worst advice, I was about to say the greatest worst advice. The worst advice that's ever been given to someone is just go with your heart. That is crazy bad advice, right? Okay. And so when I surrender, it means that I am surrendering how I feel about something to what Jesus says to do. I'm surrendering what I want to do because I'm being obedient to him. And so in order for to lead your family spiritually, it means that you have to first surrender.
Yeah, absolutely.
We surrender our life to follow him, and then we have to surrender our lives to his leading. Yeah. And so we start leading our families towards Jesus when we, when we align our lives to his will and to his word. Mm-hmm. And so that's how the process starts.
Yeah. What happens in a family if it gets out of alignment? If Jesus isn't first, if there's no surrender, if it's I'm going to make my decisions, I can make the decisions I need to for my family. I've been put in this position of leadership over my kids, and I don't want to surrender, or I'm going to surrender to some of it, but I'm not going to surrender to all of it. What happens in a family, or could happen in a family in that situation?
Well, so a lot of things, right? There's oftentimes not an immediate consequence for our decisions.
Sure.
And it's actually much better when there is, right? Because what happens is everything's rocking along and going well, and I'm leading my family and I'm responsible for this, and I like this part, but I don't like this part, and Sundays are important, but we're only going to go a couple times, and just everything's out of whack, right? And so you can rock on and do that for a period of time, and there may not be any issues. But what ends up happening is that at some point down the road, you're going to be confronted with a challenge, a problem, a situation, and if you don't have the if you don't have the right grounding and the right process of decision making in place, then you can be in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we hear often is the problems that come and happen to families when they get this wrong, right?
Yeah.
Because it's it leads to divorce and all kinds of stuff. And there are times when a family can go for decades and just rocking along doing their thing and everything seems to be going, and then something up, or the world we're in right now where things are being thrown at our kids so much, the family in general, but really at our kids so much, is that what you're doing is you're trying to give them the understanding of who they are. For us, it starts with identity, right? So Jennings, Carson, Robert, their identity has never been in something else. So their identity's never been in a sport. Their identity's not in their sexuality. Their identity's not in sorority. That's not their identity. One of the things that we've been I'm not saying that we get it right all the time, but it's been our focus is to help our kids understand that their identity is in Jesus, and it's what Jesus says about them that's important. And so, and that has a tremendous benefit and blessing in our family's life and in my kids' life because of that. Right? So they, so you're building something in them so that when troubled times comes or big decisions in life come, or who you're going to marry, or where you're going to go to school, or any of the decisions that you make, that what we try to do is give them the right foundation, starting with identity, to help them understand, and then you see it begin to blossom in them when stuff comes their way, and they,
right, because they can fall apart pretty quickly if their identity is in something else.
100%.
Whether it's a sorority or a sport or who they are in high school, those are gone, and you've got to move on. But an unchanging, I find my identity is in Jesus. And that's a churchy term sometimes, right? So people hear like, what do you mean my identity's in Jesus? And you're just talking about this non-changing, you're playing a sport now, that's gone in the future. You're not destroyed because of that.
That's
Jesus does not leave.
That's right.
And so that's, for Wendy and I, it's one of the things that we talk about all the time is what you do is not who you are. Right? That's not who you are. What sport you play, that's not who you are. Don't attach yourself to it. Don't make everything about you that, because if that's gone, then you're going to crumble.
Yep. And we see it all the time, right, around here.
Yeah, we do.
And how social media has played a huge part in how kids, girls specifically, in many ways, see themselves. And I'm not saying that we haven't had challenges there, but what we've been able to do is say, hey, remember, we're over here.
Yep.
Remember who we are.
Yeah.
And so it's what it does is it just raises very strong, mature kids who are able to be out in a crazy world like we're in today, and be able to navigate that in a way that is true.
That's right. And so packaging this whole thing together, we're looking at spiritual leadership in the home. We're talking about surrendering. And the only way for us to model that is to live the exact same way, is that we aren't, what I do is not who I am. And we have to model that in our homes. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to get on the same page with spouses to model that same thing. And so, question on that. What do you and Shelly, how do you guys talk through things like that? I mean, you're talking about spiritual leadership in the home, and you're like, hey, how are we going to lead our kids? And you got kids in different directions, and you have kids in different schools and different sports, and y'all are busy, right? She works, you work, kid in college, 2 kids in high school, and y'all are, and everybody gets it. But how do you have intentional conversations, or where do you guys go when you're talking about, hey, how are we going to lead Robert or Jennings or Carson in this situation? How do you and Shelly handle that together?
Yeah. So I would say that it starts with just we're on the same page. We both are Jesus followers, and so we're on the same page. Is that concerned, right?
Yeah, right.
But I also want to say that it is not easy for us, and it's, a lot of times people look at maybe us and they say, well, gosh, you're a pastor, so this is just easy for y'all. It's actually harder. And what I mean by that is that when you grow up as a preacher's kid, all kids, rebel against at some point. They rebel against, things you ask them to do, they rebel. So what happens in pastoral families is you get a double whammy, where there's some rebellion against not just the normal things, but then there's a rebellion on some level against the faith, right?
Yeah.
And people don't like things forced on them. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
But at the same time, if our rules in our house are, we go to church. It's just who we are. And it's not just this rote thing that we do, but we try to explain and talk about why. And so there's this rhythm of my kids know that their daddy is serious about prayer because they see me pray. They know their daddy's serious about the scripture because they see.
So you read it.
They know that I'm serious about following Jesus and surrendering because they've seen me have to forgive people I didn't want to forgive. Mm-hmm. They've seen, they've watched all those things happen. And so my point in that, please, I'm not saying that I get it all right. I'm not. What I'm saying is they have to see. You can only have what you give away. You can only give away what you have. Mm-hmm. So if I don't have a relationship with Jesus, I can't give that to my kids. If I don't have a lifestyle that follows Jesus, I can't model it for my family.
That's right.
And so it has to be it's who I am. They know it's who I am. They know it's who their mama is, even more so in some ways.
That's right, yeah.
And so that way, it becomes more than just, it's just something we have to do. Because one of the things that you probably heard me say before is rules without relationship always equals rebellion. And so if I push rules on my kids, but there's no relationship there, then it creates problems. And so one of the things I'm very intentional about is having a relationship with my kids. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't, if you know me or if you watch on social media at all, I'm always doing stuff with them. So I've got Jennings time and I've got Carson time and I've got Robert time. And then I am, reading the Psalms before school. Yeah, we're this coming Monday, only because I forgot the grape juice for yesterday, which was Monday, is we're doing communion together on Mondays before school.
Your family?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it is a reminder to them, and I actually got this from John Freeland. It's a reminder to them that Jesus gave his life for us. And because of what he's given us through salvation, that we live for him in all that we do. So when we're at school, we're on the lacrosse field, when we're fishing, when we're wherever we are, is that we live for him. And And so that's just a part. How it's steering them, right?
Yeah.
And so everybody's family has different dynamics, and so you can't just overlay everything,
Yeah.
But there's some things in how we lead our family that we can, that just where they are in life and what they're going through, and then just to help lead them in that way. And so that's how we do it. And so it's modeling it, it's talking about it, it's prioritizing, because there was a time and I made some mistakes and I allowed things outside to become the priority in our home, and I've been pretty vocal about that.
Yep.
And it was, I thought I could manage it. I couldn't, because God has a code, an order, a design for how families should live and how we should carry ourselves and the things that we do. And it's a design not to limit us, but it's a design to give us life and blessing.
Yep.
And so as we live into that, and what I mean by that, I mean it's keeping a Sabbath. It's tithing and how we spend our money. It's how we focus our time and the things that we do. Like, so if we've got something every single moment of every single day, day in and day out, and there is no time for relationship building within our family, that's going to come back and bite you.
Yeah,
it's going to come back and bite you.
And you're going to look back at some point in your parent life and go, what went wrong?
Yep.
What happened?
And if we're honest with ourselves when that time comes, you can trace the dots back to a moment. And so, when you take something in your family, let's just use any kind of extracurricular activity.
Yep.
Right? And so when that becomes everything, then what happens is, if you say, like, if I'll just use fishing for example. If I put that number one, and so I say, okay, we're going to do this. We got practice Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're going to do this on the weekends. And so what happens is it's not intentional, but everything else has to align with that.
Right.
Right?
Yep, absolutely.
And because it does, your finances align with it, how you spend your time, your church activities, everything aligns with that. And what happens is it's so out of order that you'll wake up 6 or 8 months and there's issues.
That's right, yeah. It becomes a little G God in your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It becomes a little G God, and you end up serving it.
That's right.
And that's how we get off track. That is just really the number one way that families in this culture today get off track. Because these are all good people trying to do the right thing for their kids, give them the opportunities to benefit them so that they have a leg up, and all those kinds of things. I always say that our human superpower is justification. We can justify anything, right? But that's how we do it. And so that's why it's so important, going even back to the original question, is that spiritual leadership for me and for all of us as spiritual leaders in our homes is directing our families in a particular direction. And so it is so easy for them to get off course. So my biggest job is keeping us aligned and focused.
Yeah, absolutely. And modeling it. I mean,
that's right.
It's really great to hear that, you set aside time you're a pastor, so you do this stuff all the time, right? All of the prayer, all of the scripture, you can certainly do that in your office, communion, but you've brought that back into your home because, you recognize the importance of what that means to the family.
And it is very difficult for us. Yeah. It's not like this easy thing. I mean, there's meetings that are taking place in the mornings. Hey, we woke up late. We got to get breakfast. We got to get out because we're going to be late for school.
Yeah, right.
And all the stuff that anybody else has to deal with, we have to deal with.
Yeah.
And so, but it's, what do I have to do? What shifts do I have to make? What changes do I have to make in order that I can give 5 or 10 minutes with all our people before we run out the door.
Right. What long-term benefits does that instill in your kids?
It first of all, it's just who they are, right? And so we're not defined by culture, and so what we don't often recognize is how culture is constantly trying to define who we are. And culture is constantly trying to define who your children are. And there's all kinds of things happening today where that's obviously taking place, right? And so when my mother passed away from cancer when I was in sophomore, junior in high school, and she used to always say, "I'm preparing you for when I'm not here," right? And all of us are preparing our kids for when we're not there, because we're not going to be able to,
That's right.
we're not with them every day, all day long.
That's right.
So it's preparation so that they can make right decisions. See, when you know who you are and when you know what you're about, then the decision-making process. I used to tell Carson as an example. And I don't know where she is after her injury, but there was a time where she wanted to play college lacrosse. That's all she wanted to do. And so when she'd come up and there'd be, I want to play college lacrosse. And so when a time would come up and it would say, you should have a decision to make. And the decision is, do I want to go hang out with my friends or am I going to go to practice? And you go, do you want to play college lacrosse?
That's right.
The decision becomes, well,
Very
of course,
clear.
this is the
That's
decision.
Right. Yep.
And so that's an example of what I'm trying to say when it comes to when we train our kids up and they know who they are and what they're about and who we're following and why, then there are certain things that come their way and they have a better opportunity or chance to do the right thing versus not knowing any of those things.
Right.
When things like, just use a hot one, abortion. My kids understand the importance and the sanctity of life. And so therefore, as it relates to issues like that, they have a foundation by which to make decisions.
They're not going to allow society
to tell them
what to think.
That's exactly right.
Is you've actually put that into the
and not just saying this is what we do because this is what we are. No,
that's right. This is why we believe what we believe.
Yeah, why the sanctity of life is important.
That's right.
Why you're created in the image of God, and that there is a little bit of God woven into who you are. Right. And so, and that's not just for you, that's for the unborn. And that's, I knew you before foundation of the world.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so, so helping them, when they start understanding that, once they understand those types of very critical issues about life, they understand themselves and they see themselves through the lens of the truth of God and God that we find in God's Word.
Yeah.
It gives them a leg up. And they don't walk around confused or,
looking for answers from somewhere else.
Trying to find, exactly, that's the big one, is they're not looking for other places to find answers. Right. That doesn't mean that they don't question.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they don't, have issues. But when you understand who you are and what you're about, you're able to navigate and process life circumstances, in a much greater way than without it.
I so love the rhythm of doing something every morning, and you get into that rhythm as a family, and you're modeling personally as a dad and mom with Shelly the surrender part, right, on a daily basis, and you've created this rhythm. I remember growing up, my dad used to break out the small little daily breads. You remember, little daily breads, and it was every morning before we went to school, we had to listen to him read this daily bread. And I got to be honest, half the time I just wanted to get out of the dang house.
Yep.
But that was our rhythm as a family. Every day we sat there. And I can picture it in my brain with him sitting right there reading that daily bread every single day. And I look back on it, and now I understand why it was so important for him to do that. Was because he was modeling it, and he was making sure that we understood the importance of what it meant to put God in front of anything else that happened that day. And so I didn't get it when I was a kid, but I get it now as an adult. And so I love when you talk about the rhythms that you have as a family.
Yeah, and so it's not legalistic either. So this morning, for example, we didn't do anything, but we didn't because Shelley had to leave at 6 o'clock. Carson stayed away last night, and so with some friends because they were on a school night, which I didn't understand, but they don't ask me some things. And so it's just me and Robert. And so this morning we get up a little bit earlier, and then we went and had breakfast together before I took him to school.
Yeah.
Right. And so this isn't legalism.
That's right.
It's just, and so if you think about it, if you go a month, let's just say 20 days of school, and you got 10 days in, what do you think the impact is going to be? It's going to be solid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so it's about creating those rhythms, but the kids, our kids are really smart, and just like we are and were. And so they know when they know what you're prioritizing. They know what's important to you. They know what's important to the family. They know, Shelley and I have always lived by a series of non-negotiables. There are just certain things that are non-negotiables for us. We're not going to go outside of these non-negotiables. Our kids knows what they are. And they've seen they've seen the world push up against us, and we've said this is as far as we go.
Yep.
Right. And so my point is just that you got to have some of those things built in, or man, you're like, it's the whole parable of Jesus talking about the house built on sand and a house built on the rock, right? Yeah. The winds come, the rains came, and the house that was built on the sand, it was crushed. Yeah. But the house that was built on the rock, the winds came, the rain poured, and it was able to stand because its foundation was solid. Yeah. And that is a parable about what it means for us today to live in a society and a culture that's like, man, you're talking about wind and rain and stuff happening
non-stop
in the world
for our kids.
Yeah, and so, man, if you don't know who you are, man, our kids are just like all over the place, and and that you think about what happens. Like there's all kinds of depression, sadness, all kinds of addiction.
Absolutely.
Sexual promiscuity, all this is a list of things that kids have to deal with, and why? It's because their foundation is not solid, and so they're lost, and they can be right there in our house, and we're saying, well, why can't we get this right, or what's wrong with this situation, or why aren't they acting or things going, and it's because the foundation's jacked up. Yeah. And until you get that, it's just dangerous, right? And it's why as a pastor team that we're always screaming it, right? Thank God if you are of a family right now and your foundation's not where it needs to be and you don't have all these problems. It's more luck than anything else.
Yep.
It's
absolutely.
Luck. And so,
or I would say that your kids might be too young to be fully influenced by society because at a certain age they're just too young yet, right? Yeah. They just haven't been, their eyes haven't been opened up. They haven't been in the education system long enough. They have not been, influenced by society yet, but it's coming. Yeah. So now's the time.
Yeah, we go to a Christian school, but I see Jennings in college and all that she's doing, and she'll come to me and she'll say, "Dad, you'll never believe what this professor said today." Yeah. And she was very respectful. She honored him or her as the leader in the classroom. But the things that this person said, she knows the truth. And so she's not persuaded by those types of things that happen. She's just not. And so that's when when Shelley and I look at each other and give each other a fist bump, right?
Absolutely.
Going, thank God, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why it's important. Like, it doesn't I'm not concerned about any of my kids today around a lot of this type of stuff that they hear, because they're pretty, they understand who they are. Now, that don't mean that we don't have issues again, and that we have, we without saying a lot on a podcast.
You're a normal family with teenagers.
That's exactly right.
That's just how it goes, right? You still have to navigate all of the normal things that happen, regardless of if you do this.
That's right.
But because you do you have the rhythms, and you model it, and you lead your home in this, hey, we follow Jesus, and here's the reason that we follow Jesus. You're not going to be as far off if things get a little out of whack. And then there's a North Star to come back to,
right? And
your kids know what that is. And you're going to have stuff going on that you just got to whack them upside the head a little bit sometimes. That's all right. I got 2 teenage boys. Sometimes you just got to get up in their face.
Yep.
And I got big son. I don't get up in his face much, but big coot. But I get it, and that's okay. And parents, if our senior pastor can't always get it right, don't get frustrated, but be consistent.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've talked about here recently, and we're almost done. I know that we could probably sit here for a long time and just kind of keep telling stories and having conversation. But the last message you gave 2 days ago was brace for impact. And it was this idea of that trials and issues in life are going to come. And you talked about it a little bit with, when you build your house on sand and those things come, that you don't have this rock solid foundation. And you gave an incredible story, and I won't recap it. If you guys have not heard the sermon from August 18th, go back and listen to that sermon from August 18th. Incredible sermon on how you told the story of the king Hezekiah and how all that went down. It was incredible to listen to that. What's like 1 or 2 things that you would tell parents on, hey, things are going to show up in your kid's life, and you've got to brace for these things? Mm-hmm. What's like a practical tip, practical thought that you could share with parents on when those show up in your kids' lives or in the family?
Yeah. So multidimensional, right? But for what we try to do is that our kids can come to us with anything.
Got
it. And just, as a parent, it's difficult at times when you hear certain things to not react to it.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that our family is become a safe place for you to bring whatever's going on.
How did you get there?
Just building relationships for a long time.
Yeah.
And with modeling it with the little guys, and not, just throwing a fit about when things happen.
Yeah. That's hard.
It's hard. It's very difficult.
You hear situations with your kids, you want to step in and do something about it.
And
many times.
Yep. And there are certain times where they'll come to me about some things before they'll go to Shelley, or they'll go to Shelley with things before they'll come to me, and then we just we just talk through it and deal with it, and we come up with a plan of attack.
Yep.
And so that's one way. The other way is just this is modeling. We talked about Sunday, this idea of refuge, that God is our refuge and our strength. And so God becomes our refuge when we align our lives with His Word, right?
Yeah.
And so And so when bad things happen or we have to deal with tough situations, it's to run back. We turn back towards Jesus and not away from Jesus. And so that is, what does that mean? That means that when we have a situation is that we pray about it, or we talk about it, or we pray about it as a family, or there's been some, first thing that comes to my mind was there was when Jennings and the sorority that she's in right now, I mean, there were some challenges with that in the beginning, and so it was a little bit of a letdown for her initially. Everything ended up working out perfectly, and being able to come back and to talk through those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
And to share, this is how I feel about it, and I'm hurting or embarrassed or whatever's going on,
Yeah.
and then be able to just kind of to talk through that as a family, and family's not like Carson and Robert sitting in the room, but Shelley and I sitting around talking about it. Discipline happens the same way, right? And so there's some rules and way things happen, and if we break some of those rules, there's consequences for that, and we explain and talk about it as to why. And so what you do in that process when you do that is you build this community among the family to where you can have conversations.
Yeah.
And people can talk about things.
Yeah, and it becomes, as you said, a safe place for conversation. And so if there's something that goes on, if there's an impact that shows up in their life, they actually have confidence that they can bring it back to you and Shelley and have that conversation.
Yeah. And so I have a rule in our house, and no excuses. No excuses. And so excuses are only little lies we tell ourselves so that we don't have to deal with truth. And I'm not dogmatic about it, but we've created a truth environment.
Got it.
And so we don't, dynamics in the family start messing up when there's this little thing out there that we don't really want to talk about because it'll make mama upset or daddy upset or yada yada, whatever it is, right? And no, that's not. We do not go there.
Okay.
What's the truth?
Yep.
Because and I know this seems a little bit off topic, but it's not. Because what we do is instead of creating an environment where we become truth tellers, you can only model grace and truth in the world if you model grace and truth in the home. And so it means that, and it's vice versa.
Yeah.
Because one of the greatest stories that we don't have time for today is when one of my kids came back at me, and in a respectful way, but they said, "Dad, what about this?" And Shelley was drinking tea, and she literally spit it out. Because it was right. It was right.
Called you out.
It called me out.
Yeah.
And so I had to go, and it was Carson, and I had to go, Carson, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
I did not think about that, and what you said was right, and I'm sorry for that, and I'm going to make that right.
Yeah.
Right. And so when mom and dad are willing to do that kind of stuff,
absolutely.
And I don't know that I'd have been willing to if she hadn't have just called me right out.
Yeah, right.
But I really, you know what I'm saying. And so
absolutely.
You have to if you don't model that kind of dialogue.
That's right. Part of leadership is saying, "You're right, I was wrong."
Yeah.
I mean, that's just absolutely something that, whether you're leading a business or leading your home, sometimes you're going to get called out a little bit, and you got to admit it when you're wrong.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say is just the understanding the role of mom and dad.
Yeah.
Shelley is the mom, and she is a nurturer, and there is a 100% place for that, and it needs to be there. But there's also a place for me, and to where I become the heavy a little bit.
Yep.
And in families that don't have that, because it was designed that way,
Yeah.
it was modeled that way. I'm the guy who has to fight for the family. I'm the guy who has to set a lot of the boundaries. And not that Shelley doesn't, because she does, but then there are times where things are getting out of hand and she looks at me and it's like, you need to handle this, right? And I have to stand in and say, this is what we're doing.
Yeah,
I mean, there's another rule in our family where you better not talk back to your mother, and you better don't roll your eyes at your mama, and
You go running across.
you're in trouble,
Yeah, right,
Because so it's this idea of respecting,
Yeah, absolutely.
and respecting the roles that we play. And Robert and I were going to school this morning, and I was talking to him. Shelley calls, and Robert said something. And Shelley said, "Oh, you're getting your daily dad lecture, aren't you?"
Nice.
And I'm fine with that role.
Yeah, that's right.
Because
Absolutely.
I've got to,
You have limited time in those chances, and that's just your responsibility as dad.
That's right.
That's your responsibility. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Buddy, I think we've done pretty good. You all right?
I'm good.
You got any more words?
No.
Yeah, it's all good. Hey,
I tell Shelley when I get home, I've used all my words.
I used
today.
all my words. I need a few minutes. That's right. Well, hey, man, I appreciate it. We appreciate it. Here's the deal, parents. You can do this. It starts with surrender. It starts with you modeling this surrender to your kids and showing them and teaching them that there's a truth in this world, and his name is Jesus. And regardless of what shows up in their life, in their world, in your world as a family, if you can direct them to follow the path of Jesus in their life, then that's spiritual leadership in your home. And you can do it. If you're stressed out, if you need help, we're here to help. You can shoot me an email, matt.lake@mtbethel.org. You can reach out and we can send you books. There's amazing questions in here when it comes to leadership in the home and challenge you to some different things. If there's resources that you need, we've got them, or we can find them, but it all starts with a conversation. So if there's a way that we can support you in leading your home, we would love and be honored to be able to do that. Jody, I appreciate it, my man. It's always good to hang with you, have conversations like this. Appreciate you running down here in our cool little studio that we've got. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Talk It Up. Hope to see you guys next time on our new episode.